Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Sam Pandey, and joining me is my co-president, Bill Coyle. Both of us are the co-presidents of the GEMA MBA McDonough School of Business Club. GEMA stands for the Georgetown Entertainment and Media Alliance, and Bill and I are heading up the MBA chapter. We're really thankful to have a great alumnus with us today, Rich Battista, who was actually the original founder of GEMA and has been running the GEMA alumni branch for the past couple of years. And he's been doing a great job. And so we're very thankful to have him speak with us today. Kind of a brief overview and a format of our webinar today. We're going to go through an introduction of Rich, talk a little bit about his career, and then Bill and I are going to do a alternating Q&A with Rich. And then after we get through a couple questions, we're going to open it up to anyone who has any questions here on the webinar, on the Zoom, as it is. So it should be roughly like an hour-long event. So we'll go from there. But without further ado, I just wanted to introduce Rich Battista on the call, who is currently in Los Angeles. Rich is nearly a 30-year veteran of the entertainment and media industry. He has been a proven CEO time and time again, building up great large-scale multi-platform companies. He has reshaped and transformed and sold two multi-billion-dollar publicly traded companies in Time Incorporated and Gemstar TV Guide. And he has also launched and built several high valuable businesses during his long years inside the Fox News Corporation. And currently today, Rich is an investor and he's an advisor. In addition to running GEMA, he was a president and CEO of Time Incorporated from September 2016 to January 2018 before overseeing the $3 billion sale of the company to Meredith Corporation. And during his tenure, he oversaw the transformation of the company from a mostly print business into a leading multimedia enterprise and a top 10 digital property in the United States. Additionally, during a period of more than 18 years, Rich has held a variety of senior management roles at the Fox News Corporation, where he was integral in conceiving of and operating a significant portfolio of cable networks. And he ultimately served as the president of Fox's multi-billion-dollar portfolio of national entertainment and sports cable networks. Rich has also served as CEO of Gemstar TV Guide from 2004 to 2008, in which he led a turnaround of the company and successfully directed its $2.3 billion sale. And he earned his MBA from HBS, Harvard Business School, and an undergraduate degree from Georgetown University with cum laude honors. In 2015, he was awarded Georgetown's John Carroll Award and the university's highest alumni honor. Rich, thank you again for being with us.
Great to be with you, Sam, Bill, Eric, and I want to just quickly say thank you to you and Bill for taking the lead on the GEMA MBA chapter. It's so important that we have, you know, the folks on the ground at Georgetown, each of the different schools really overseeing and helming the GEMA activity. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Rich. Bill, you want to get started with the Q&A?
Sure. Yeah. For all those attending, we're going to go into a Q&A here for about 40 minutes. And then we'll open up for some questions from the audience. So to get started here, Rich, I was wondering if you could tell us how you got your start in the entertainment industry and how your trajectory evolved over time and led to your success.
Sure. You know, I grew up in the Boston area. Didn't grow up with any connections to media and entertainment. I was one of these kids who was a massive TV fan and always just loved media. I always gravitated to I loved news. I loved watching television and how it was created and produced always fascinated me. And so, you know, I always loved it, but, you know, I did a lot of performing in musical theater as a kid. So I've always been, you know, in and around it just as a hobby or as a passion, but never in a million years did I ever think I'd work in the industry. And after Georgetown, I was in the 2-year analyst program at Morgan Stanley, the financial analyst program, which is a pretty traditional route, and worked in the real estate group. So again, nothing related to media. And then I went to Harvard Business School right after that. And really at Harvard is when I got my eyes opened to the huge world in front of me. You know, working in real estate investment banking is a very narrow field. It's interesting and exciting, but it's quite narrow. And going to Harvard Business School, just being introduced and have my eyes open to so many other industries and job functions. But even back then, this was actually my 30th reunion this year, which is hard to believe. But even back then, entertainment media was not much of a job choice or selection by anybody. It was considered a kind of off the beaten path. So I had to work really hard and stay really convicted to go into that industry, because unlike in investment banking and consulting and, marketing and other firms where they hire everybody in, March of your second year. I literally had to graduate without a job. So I just pounded the pavement and I didn't get my job until the summer. Fox was looking for somebody and I was able to, through another contact, hear about it. And so, the big lesson on that was if you have the passion and the conviction, you can do it, but you have to be willing to have your friends ask you in, April, where are you going to work? And you're like, oh, I'm trying to do this thing in media. Now, again, today it's way more sophisticated and so many people want to be in media and there's treks that all the schools do. So it's a much more conventional search. But I broke in and was doing sort of biz dev kind of work at Fox in the TV division, kind of a classic MBA kind of job. And just, moved up the ladder in the business. And, I'd say, because I could do an hour on this, which I don't want to do, but I think the key pieces to it are, I never had a career plan. Like, I'm not a believer in writing down like what you want to be in 10 years or what you want to do the next 5 to 10 years. Cause I think that limits you, particularly in the media business, which is so dynamic and constantly evolving. It's really important to be open to new opportunities. One interesting turning point in my career was I was working in Fox and got promoted to VP and was doing really well at the age of 28. And I was running one of our distribution groups. So like licensing our shows to like the HBOs and Showtimes of the world, which was interesting, but I wasn't near the content at all. I could have been, I guess, selling, stemware or, iPhones or something. It didn't really matter that it was entertainment. And there was an opportunity when they were launching the FX network in New York, and they were building this really interesting content production group. And I just found it fascinating. It's when the cable network era was really growing. This was in 1994. And I said, you know what, I want to move back east and I want to work in that. And I'm actually willing to become like a low-level producer. And my salary would have been cut by 70%. It's funny because I was going to do it. And then the head guy found out about it. He's like, wait a minute, this guy went to Harvard Business School. He's a VP. Shit, we could use him to like lead our whole finance efforts and he wouldn't have to take a salary cut. And they convinced me to do that instead. So I was able to I was able to go back and do something in a really interesting environment, but I also played to my strengths. At the same time, I learned a tremendous amount about content and production and the creation of television. So that was one interesting curveball in my career that I took because I just felt like I wanted to learn that part of the business. And sometimes, you have to step backwards. Again, luckily I didn't really have to, but I was willing to. And then I guess another important turning point was I went back to Fox a year later. I got promoted and I was really involved in launching a lot of our cable networks and running them. And I was 9 years in, and this was when the internet boom happened. And I was sort of feeling a little unchallenged at that point. And, I had a lot of friends going into the internet and I said, I got to try this. This is like a once in a lifetime thing. And I sort of felt like if it didn't work out, I could always go back to Fox, probably. It's not a guarantee, but I felt like they would probably take me back. So sure enough, I went and left. I raised, like 8 to 10 million. I had a partner and we did this internet. It was sort of a content play on the internet. And, in 1999, and the first year was, as I tell everyone, the first year was amazing. And the second year was a nightmare because it, was like a boom bust and everyone had to shut down and close down. And, but I learned a lot from that experience. As I say to people, you can learn more sometimes from your failures. And I learned a lot about myself and I had a lot of grit, determination, but I also realized how important it is when you wind something down to do it the right way too. And I felt like we really did do it the right way. And I was very proud of that. And I did, in fact, get to go back to Fox and I really wanted to operate again. I had been operating at Fox and then I started doing some biz dev there again. And I really missed operating. And I got an opportunity to go run a sister company called Gemstar TV Guide, which was a company that went through tremendously negative press and their stock went from 60 to 2. And was really a challenge company. And I went in and, over 4 years kind of turned it around and had a great sale. And so I was a public company CEO at the age of 40 running a multi-billion-dollar company. But it worked out really well and just tons of hard work and the like. So I'd say another important part that I'd say to all of you out there is operating businesses and owning a P&L is, I think, super important. The power in business, the power roles are given to people who know how to operate things. And sure, if you're a CFO, you can have a lot of power, obviously, or if you're a general counsel or something like that, because you're in the C-suite. But there's such a lack of strong operators and managers in all business, particularly in our industry, that, I would always give advice is if you can try to find a way, if you're interested in doing it, if you can find a way to operate at an early age and learn the ropes and grow that way, it's a great way to learn. So anyway, I did that. I went back to Fox again after that, and ran our cable network group. And then I ended up having an opportunity to move back again to New York and run Time Inc., which again was a challenged company that was trying to do a transformation. And I just thought it had an amazing collection of brands, People, Sports Illustrated, Fortune, Food and Wine, Time, Southern Living, Travel and Leisure. Amazing brands that instead of looking at them as magazines, you should be looking at them as multi-platform brands. And how do we find interesting ways to take these brands in new places and monetize them in new ways? So that was really the MO, and the company got spun out as its own public company. So I went in to go run People and ultimately Sports Illustrated, and then I ended up becoming CEO of the whole company. And again, we ended up selling it to one of our competitors. So I've had, my career, I'd say the other big thing is not having a plan and not being linear, but being willing to take some shots and take opportunities. I'm a big believer in that. Because if you say, I want to make $150,000 by the time I'm 32 or whatever, if you stick to that, you may miss out on an opportunity where you may have to take a step back in salary. But that opportunity could lead to you becoming a way more, influential and powerful person and having a stimulating career. So that's a big piece of my belief is be flexible and be willing to take some risks and chances in your life.
Got it. Rich, thank you so much for sharing that and your journey through it as well. I wanted to kind of piggy that with our next question on the theme of remaining adaptable and adaptability. Obviously, we find ourselves in a very unique time in history where a lot of businesses are changing. We just talked briefly about Facebook, offering that new remote policy to more than half of their employees. So we kind of wanted to ask the question now that leads into that of, what do you think the long-lasting impacts of this current COVID-19 crisis will have on the entertainment industry? And do you see any norms arising out of this, like an increase in straight-to-stream releases, concerts, music industry going towards live stream models, or an accelerated rise in esports? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think about this all the time. I think clearly for the next couple years, you're going to see some real changes just because of the effects of COVID. I think over time, it will get back to normal. People want to be at live music events. People want to go to the baseball game and the hockey game and the basketball game. And people want to go to movie theaters. I think they're going to be a bit spooked to do that for quite a while. But I'd hate to think that people don't go back to those worlds. What I do think will happen is, I think the work from home thing's huge. I think that will be a big change. I've already talked to a few of my CEO friends at different big entertainment media companies, and they said, absolutely, we are going to, especially like satellite offices, a friend of mine, if you have a company that has 5 satellite offices where maybe you have sales executives or other executives, I think all of that goes away. You go to work from home. I think the one area that it probably will be long lasting is the actual creation and production of content. I think you're going to see more and more move more and more to green screens and special effects and smaller casts, smaller people around a set. I think that could be one that even when COVID goes away eventually, ultimately, hopefully, that you will see a change. And one of it's because they're going to realize they can do these things for a lot cheaper. And I think they're going to say, you know what, the quality is still really high. So in terms of the theater piece, look, before COVID, there was a trend towards, there's a lot of talk about moving towards the theaters going away. I don't see it happening. I do see definitely selective folks wanting to have more stuff released to streaming. What I do think the coronavirus has done permanently, though, is accelerating the growth of streamers and accelerating the use of consuming content in digital. And so I do think like traditional TV is going to have an accelerated decline. And you've seen it, right? The unbelievable consumption of all these platforms, digital platforms. I think that will remain and accelerate. And people have just gotten so much more comfortable with technology because they've been forced to. And I think Zoom is an unbelievable technology that will create all kinds of, remote opportunities that you didn't see before. I think travel will reduce tremendously. I know in our industry, definitely going to see that for sure.
That's great. Thanks, Rich. I kind of piggybacking off of that, what do you see as the future of traditional TV? If these new habits, more affinity towards streaming options, does traditional TV just become live sports? How do you see the future of that evolving?
Yeah, there's no doubt that live sports has been one of the critical reasons why broadcast television hasn't fallen faster. I mean, broadcast TV has been unbelievably resilient. I mean, when I was at Fox, we did analyses, in 2005, and the charts were showing that broadcast TV is going to go like this, and it really hasn't. It's held steady. And it's because advertisers still want to advertise on broadcast TV, because even today, it's still the most efficient buy. It's still the fastest, most convenient way to reach a mass number of people, even though a lot fewer people are watching. But, with time delayed television, those audiences are bigger than you think. And you have to think about really just beyond, watching it on your television. Every show that's on NBC or ABC or Fox goes on Hulu the next day. So you have young people who watch, I don't know what, they may watch, Masked Singer on Hulu and don't even know it's on Fox. They just watch it on Hulu because that's where they watch stuff. So I think broadcast TV will eventually fritter, but it's going to take a long time. And the other big move is you're going to see the move to digital streaming, not just subscription, but what's called AVOD, advertiser video on demand, and free ad-supported streaming. I don't know if any of you have heard of Pluto TV or Tubi TV or Zumo. These are new platforms. NBC is launching something called Peacock, which will be a streaming platform mostly free. So that's where you're going to see the move. You're going to move from watching cable networks to watching these free ad-supported streaming platforms. At least that's my contention. And that's where the advertisers are going to go. Advertisers are so frustrated because they can't advertise on Netflix, they can't advertise on Amazon, they can't advertise on Disney Plus, they can't advertise on Apple TV Plus. And so there's $70 billion spent every year in broadcast and cable network advertising. That's a big number that's going to shift. So I'm super bullish on advertising free ad-supported streaming. I think it's kind of the next frontier.
Got it. On that point, we were just discussing it about the kind of introduction of more streaming companies to the battlefield here. And I kind of wanted to touch on what your insights would be on the future of streaming wars. You mentioned NBC Peacock, Apple TV, Amazon Pluto. Are there going to be victors, losers? And what does this mean also for content creators, the actual kind of production companies that they're contracting with?
Yeah. I do think there'll be winners. I don't think you'll see as many as there are today. I don't want to name names at this point, but I think clearly Netflix will be number one and will always be number one. I think Disney Plus will always have a seat, especially because they have family and kids programming. And then look, I think the rest of them are still TBD. Quibi's launched. I think they're really struggling. I think there's a host of reasons why that's happening. I think HBO Max will be formidable, but they're going to be at a very high price point, so people are questioning that. Peacock, I think, is really smart because Peacock is primarily going to be ad-supported, as I mentioned a minute ago. I think that's a really smart kind of we'll zig while they zag move. Apple TV Plus, they've just been they haven't really gone out with gusto. They're just kind of slowly rolling out shows. So I'm just curious to see if they're going to go bigger. And then Amazon, I think, will be there too. And so the answer on the producing side, it's been an unbelievable boom. And it's like the golden age. I mean, if you're a content producer right now, you're happy as a clam. The question's going to be, will that train slow down at all? And then secondly, the one huge trend in the industry, which is really fascinating, is, which you guys may be aware of, is the Netflixes of the world, Amazons. They're owning the content. So historically, if Fox, if we produced a show and made it for like Fox produced Modern Family, which people don't probably realize that, but Fox created that show. Their production division made that show for ABC. And then that show airs for 10 years, and then you sell it in reruns, right, across all these platforms, and you make $1 gazillion. Now, Netflix buys a show, they own it 100% forever. So how do you deal with that issue? And what they're doing is they're paying people more upfront, because the person who produces that show now isn't going to make that rainbow of money pot of gold, 10 years out.
Is that a pretty big shift, this Netflix strategy of doing so? I know I've heard similarly that they are offering just bigger payouts in the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how big of a disruption or a shift in strategy that is.
It's huge. It's a huge shift. I mean, it's not a shift in strategy by them. I think it's been evolving with them. They've been doing that probably since they started doing original programming. It's just that everyone else is doing it now. So Disney, with Disney Plus, they're now going back to everyone saying, look, the days of you owning a back end of this, because Disney Plus wants to keep it on Disney Plus forever. So how do you value, you're never selling it in like a later window to somebody else. So how do you value that? So they're trying to come up with new ideas, some ways of creating phantom profits where you can try to evaluate over time what it means. It's hard. It's tough. Everyone's grappling with it. That said, if you're a content producer, you'll take the money. You'd love to own the thing, but you'll take the money, believe me. You'll take the money.
So I think maybe we'll do a small pivot. We kind of noticed something that we wanted to talk about, Georgetown as a university, as a commitment to service, and motto is being a man or woman for others. And we just wanted to hear about your own experiences. We know you were affiliated with City Year. We just wanted to know what kind of impact those organizations have on you personally as well as professionally.
Yeah. Look, I've always been a big believer in giving back. I grew up pretty modest upbringing. My parents didn't go to college. I grew up in kind of a working class background with my extended family. So I feel very fortunate that I've been able to have some success in my life and just the opportunity to give back and understanding what it means. I think I have not exactly because of my own upbringing, but I think I have a pretty good sense of how people can struggle in this world and being empathetic to that. So I've always believed in that. City Year is a very important cause to me because it's about education and helping and working with kids in at-risk environments. But by the way, creating GEMA is a perfect example of that. I created GEMA because I wanted to find a way to help, create and foster connections among alumni with the university, and also to be able to help young people learn how to, navigate through breaking into this industry, because it's a complicated industry to break into. And, but I talk to countless kids every year, and I get a lot of psychic reward from that. The pay at GEMA is not very good, let me tell you that. But I get a lot of reward from talking to young people. And, when I connect two senior alumni together who didn't know each other and they end up working on a business project together, I get tremendous fulfillment from that. So, look, Georgetown has that ethos, and it was one of the reasons I was proud to go to Georgetown. And they do walk the walk and talk the talk. And and I feel like in my personal life, my wife is an unbelievably charitable person. She started her own nonprofit many years ago, and she's an incredibly compassionate person. So she's been a great influence in me in that way too.
So a corollary to that question we wanted to ask you, Rich, was, we have a lot of MBAs even on this call or in the business school in general, even the new MBA class that's coming in, that are interested in entertainment, but a lot of them are career switchers. Like, I'm interested in entertainment, but most of my career has been in the Army. So, navigating after my MBA into the entertainment industry, we wanted to see what your biggest pieces of advice were for how to do that as an MBA coming out of Georgetown.
Let's see, a few things. I think play to your strengths for sure. So, I'll caveat that in a second, but if you think you want to be in the creative side, you'd be amazed how many MBA types want to work in the creative side of the business. There's a lot. I talk to them all the time. If you want to be in the creative side of the business, you have to completely take a step back and start at the bottom. You can't, if you want to be in the creative side of the business, I would not suggest that you go into the business side and leverage your MBA. It's just so hard. There's just such distinctly different parts of the business that it's very hard to cross over. I've had a few friends. One of my best buddies from Harvard Business School started out in theatrical distribution. Now he's one of the top TV showrunners and exec producers. But, that's not common. So if you're interested in the creative side, you got to go work at an agency at the bottom, or go work as a junior production person at the bottom. I really do think you got to do it the right way. If you want to be in the business side, I would play to your strengths to start. So MBAs, in Hollywood, all these big media companies have strategy and corporate development groups. Those are great ones to try to penetrate because you get a tremendous overview of the industry, and they like MBAs. They want to hire people like you. So they definitely like people who've had financial analysis background. So if you worked in marketing at Procter & Gamble for 5 years, it's going to be hard to get a biz dev job in Hollywood. But if you worked at Goldman or in private equity or something, you're definitely going to be high on the list of people they would love to hire. But if you've been in other disciplines, Hollywood's in a very sophisticated industry now and has all kinds of legs. And so the opportunity to work in marketing or work in, if you're interested in legal or interested in HR, if you're interested in sales, there's tremendous opportunities. But so the first thing is I would play to your strengths. So whatever your background's been, try to get in. The key in Hollywood is to get in. Just get in the door. I'm a perfect example of that. Like when I got into that job at Fox, I got paid a third of what I would have got paid if I went back to Morgan Stanley. And, but I got in and I proved my wares very quickly, but just getting in is the key. The other thing I'd say, my other piece of advice, because I get asked this a lot, is I'm a big believer in trying to have your first job be in more of a blue chip company, even if you take a step down or it's not as, so let's say some early stage, some media company that's a young company and they want you to come in and be COO and you get to do 9 different jobs and wear a lot of different hats. That sounds very alluring. Or you could work at Disney, but maybe take a job that's not quite as alluring or exciting. I would do the Disney job because I think once you get in, and if you work at an established company early on, you get a lot of credibility in Hollywood. Then any company wants to hire you. If you have Disney on your resume, and then another media company wants you, they love it. Or if an early stage company would love it. So I believe in that too. Again, if you don't get a job, an opportunity to do that, sure, take the other gig because you want to get in, like I said. And then I would, networking is so important, especially in Hollywood. It's all about networking. And, it's like I said, it's a very catch as catch can industry in terms of how they hire. Some companies have some programs a little bit like on the MBA biz dev track. You'll hear about some companies coming to business schools, but typically no. And so it's all about getting your butt to New York or LA. If you want to work in Hollywood, you got to go to LA. You got to move to LA. You can't graduate B school and go back to your home in Iowa and try to find a job. And I would, my 100% piece of advice would move to the place that you think you got to go and live on your friend's couch if you have to or something for a while. Really hard to get a job in Hollywood if you're in Alabama. So those are some of the kind of the key things I'd say.
Great, that's really helpful. Thanks, Rich. Over your career.
I've got another one. The other one, and this it's true in all industry, but again, just say yes to anything. Anything that's not crazily unreasonable. If there's an opportunity, there's a special project, and they want people to raise their hand, say yes. Hey, we need somebody to work the next 10 weekends in a row on something. Don't say, sorry, I'm surfing this weekend. Say, yeah, I'm in. Make yourself valuable and be reliable and make yourself valuable. Even and again, it's something I've been really good at in my career. Is I'm the kind of guy that I'm like a go-to guy. People could see quickly that I worked hard and that I was, committed and passionate. And so they would come to me. And if I said no to a bunch of things, they quickly move on. So that's my other piece of advice is just say yes and take the opportunity when someone gives you one.
That's great advice. Thanks. Just wondering, we talked about how quickly the industry has changed, and we were just wondering, what surprised you the most? What did you not see coming, really?
I think, I don't know if it surprised me. I think what's most fascinating is just how technology just constantly is evolving the business and making this one of the most dynamic industries you can ever work in, I'm sure if you work in insurance, there's some changes in the industry over time, but if you work in media and entertainment, there's constantly new entrants, there's constantly disruptors, there's constantly new technologies that are turning it on its ear. So I'd say when I came into the business, I probably didn't think about that as much, now that I look back. I'd say the other thing is just the acceleration of the streaming. You know, when it's a huge lesson to Hollywood, and they've made this mistake many times. But you know, when Netflix was created, all the studios said, "Sure, I'll give you my content." New entrant. If you're a sales guy and you sell TV shows for Fox, you foam at the mouth when there's a new entrant who has money, right? And you're all you care about is paying those guys to take your content because you want to hit your numbers or beat your numbers that year. And slowly Netflix did that with everybody. And guess what? Next thing you know, they had an unbelievable arsenal of programming and they were growing like a weed. They still didn't have original programming, but they had all these incredible library shows from all these studios and networks. And they grew into a monster. And now all the studios said, okay, that's over. Like, you're not getting my content anymore. I'm going to create my own competitor to you because I have to survive. They have to create these platforms to survive. That's the other, you know, that's another real lesson is, you know, one of the problems with Hollywood is, you guys know the Innovator's Dilemma. I'm sure you've read about that or heard about that. And Hollywood's been exhibit A of being afraid to innovate because they don't want to hurt themselves. And so what they've done is they've held on as long as they can to some of these old models. And trust me, they are masterful at monetizing across all these. They are masterful at maximizing the monetization of their content. Nobody even comes close to knowing how to do it as well as the world of Hollywood. But, you know, they had to at one point realize, you know, now there's these entrants that have come in that are really disrupting. And now we have to figure out how to change our model.
I guess one of the last questions that I had before opening it up to Q&A, Rich, is, you know, and it's an important question at that, but what's the best piece of content that you've watched under these times in quarantine?
Oh, right. Yeah. Probably the most important question you'll ask. Well, I've really enjoyed the Michael Jordan doc on ESPN. But in terms of content that has been made during the quarantine, you know, I watched the Graduate Together special that with Barack Obama. I thought it was unbelievably well produced. So it's interesting to see these big remote productions, how they've improved just in 6 weeks. You know, Fox did one, I mean, all the networks did one like 6 weeks ago, and that one compared to the Graduate Together one. You know, I love seeing some of the performances, you know, the cast of Hamilton reunited in this unbelievable Zoom song, the Alexander Hamilton song on Zoom, which was tremendous. I think in the podcasting space, you know, Wondery, I don't know if you guys have heard of Wondery, but they've become a real force in the podcasting industry. They did Dirty John and Dr. Death and Shrink Next Door and others. And what they're doing that's interesting is they're converting their IP from audio to television more successfully than anybody. So I think they're doing a lot of really interesting things, and they've created some great content as well.
Excellent. So we hit our 2:45 mark. Bill, did you want to ask one last question?
Yeah, sure. We can do one last one and then go to kind of an open audience Q&A. I guess maybe a good one to end on would be, what media company you think, I mean, I guess you mentioned Wonderly, but is there another media company that you think is really doing some really cool things in the market right now?
Let's see. You know, I think Spotify is really interesting. They're you're spending tremendous amounts of money to get exclusive content. You know, they bought Bill Simmons' company, The Ringer. They just, you may have saw, they just did a massive deal with Joe Rogan for his podcast. So I think Spotify has been interesting how they've evolved from just being music. So I'd say them. Wondery, I think I've really liked it. I've really liked what Wondery's been doing. I think that's been very interesting. I don't know. I think the AVOD platforms like the Pluto TVs it's a really interesting space. They've all gotten acquired by the big media companies. So it'll be interesting to see how perform going forward. But I think I just like innovative new, you know, consumption models. And I think this ad-supported free streaming is worth looking at. And Peacock too. I think Peacock's going to be a really interesting test for the industry as well.
Got it.
Thank you.
So I think we're gonna open it up to any Q&A for everyone who's watching. I know that like one or two people have already said that they had some questions, but if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and then ask your question to Rich, and then go ahead and mute yourself again. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we could use the participants tab if you want to just raise your hand on there, we'll call out. Ben King, our former president of the GEMA Club.
Yep. Thanks so much, Rich. I really appreciate it.
This better be a good question. You got pressure on.
I got a lot of pressure. But first off, thanks, Rich. This has been incredibly insightful and informative
Sure.
at the time. So this obviously wouldn't be a Georgetown webinar if we didn't talk about kind of the regulatory environment and being at the hub of kind of policy and industry. So as someone who sat at the table during an acquisition, and you look at also like the AT&T and Time Warner being held up with the DOJ, I'm just curious what your thoughts are on M&A trends within the industry, and then how, obviously, you know, not to get political, but we could have a new administration coming up, how that impacts kind of horizontal and vertical integration within the industry.
Yeah. Well, I think right now, what's interesting is you're seeing the government because of COVID, being really scrutinizing acquisitions that people want to make and making sure they're not trying to steal a company. So I'm sure you've been following the Grubhub, Facebook. Is it Facebook who's trying to buy Grubhub? Or is it Uber? So Uber is trying to buy Grubhub, and everyone feels like they're just going in and swooping in and getting a company that's, although Grubhub's doing well, they're not going to get sold at the valuation they probably would like to. And so the government now is putting tremendous pressure on Uber not to do it. I think that's fascinating. So yeah, I think whatever administration's in office has huge implications for Hollywood, for sure. Put aside the politicizing of the FCC for a minute. Before, when we didn't have that, it still was always a big deal. I mean, when you had a Democrat or Republican coming in, and companies were, their business policies and business strategies were affected by that. There have been massive changes in the industry. One of the biggest changes in the industry happened probably 20 plus years ago now, where they relaxed the rules that studios could make content and also distribute and air content. You know, before that, if you were a network, you couldn't make your own content. You had to make it all from third parties because they didn't want the networks to monopolize all the content. Then they changed that rule, and that would have tremendous impact on the business. And what ended up happening is what everyone was kind of afraid of, which is ABC created their own studio group, CBS created their own studio group, Fox created their own studio group, and guess what? 80% of their shows on ABC are from the ABC studio. Now that said, it's also proven that, you know, having creative original voices outside of them are still important and still thrive, and they do. But it definitely had a huge impact on the success of smaller companies who didn't have as many slots as they used to. So that's like one great example of something that was debated for years, and then when they had a Republican administration, that issue got relaxed. But in terms of M&A trends going forward too, I think aside from policy, I think you're going to see significant M&A activity over the next, that definitely accelerated because of coronavirus. I think you'll see a lot of it. And a lot of it's going to be just the structural requirements companies are going to have to survive or to find a way to continue to succeed going forward. They're going to need to scale. They're going to need to be more efficient. And so if you can buy another company and then cut all their, cut their costs and create synergies, you'll see a lot of that, I think.
Did we have anyone else who wanted to ask a question? If so, go ahead and raise your hand in the participant slide, and Bill will go ahead and call you out.
Don't be shy.
If not, we can go back to Rand, thank you.
Hey, Rich, thank you so much. Being a Boston guy, just curious, how do you feel about Tom Brady moving on to the Tampa Bay Bucks?
I don't begrudge him for a second. I think I don't think the Pats, they didn't demonstrate that they really wanted him. So I don't begrudge him at all. I'm excited to watch the Tampa Bay Buccaneers now. I think they're going to be a really interesting team. So it's a blow, obviously, but it's funny. I think, Boston people are super loyal to their teams, and usually they're like, the player's a devil now because you're left. In this case, it's one case where it's not happening, where most people in Boston are like, good for Tom Brady. I'm going to watch the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a lot more now.
we have another one? Pradeep?
My dad.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, how you guys doing? Sorry, joined in a little bit late. It's a very interesting topic. One of the things we've seen, I think you already touched on it, is vertical integration versus slicing and dicing the sort of the business model. And I'm here at Silicon Valley, kind of grew up with the semiconductor business, and I've seen this thing change quite a bit, where things were vertically integrated for a long time, and that was crushing innovation because everybody is like, just like they did their own thing in their own silos.
Yeah.
Applied Materials did one thing, Intel did one thing, and so on. And then they finally just gave up because it was like they realized that, they couldn't do it all together. My thought would be, if we can talk, how would innovative companies, how should they think about moving forward, how to kind of like participate and add value in this framework? I'm just kind of curious on your thoughts on that.
I think it's all about satiating the consumer. It's all about finding a consumer a problem for consumers and finding a way to solve it. And I think if you can do that, I think you're going to be a winner, certainly in the entertainment media industry. I think, again, you're right. Historically, the media companies are very closed, and it's a very closed world, and they didn't want to innovate for many, many, many years. And companies like Netflix have forced them to innovate, and Spotify has made Apple have to innovate. And so if you can come up with if there's a pain point that you can solve, I think you can have tremendous success. Interesting, like right now, I mean, I ran TV Guide years ago. Right now, I think a tremendous tremendous problem needs to be solved right now in the media company is how to help people figure out what's on and how to watch it and where to watch it. I don't know about you guys, but like you'll hear about some new show and I'm like, is it on Amazon? Is it on Netflix? Is it on Disney? Is it on Apple? And I think there's tremendous opportunity for someone out there to come up with a really interesting technology solution and consumer interface solution to help people manage, identify, discover where content is. And there are a couple of startups that have done it, but like that's a perfect example of to me, a problem that sits out there today that needs to be solved. So to me, it's all about thinking about the consumer. And, look, I come from Hollywood. I've been in the business 30 years. They haven't always thought about the consumer. They thought about their business model, how to maximize it, and, praying that new technologies aren't created to disrupt their business models.
Can I just ask a small follow-up? I think that's great. I think, to me, I think if you look at, right now, sometimes the view is like the final product, right? Meaning you're looking at a show or something, right? Like who produced it and so on. But there's so much goes on behind the scene. And I think the whole thing is if you can start to like slice and dice it, like how to be a distributor of things, not in the physical movie theater sense, but in a virtual sense. How
Sure.
to manage digital rights. There's so many aspects of it that I think, my thought is that I think innovators should really look at this market I would say in the similar sense that once upon a time, again, I could have thought that Detroit would never be the car capital of the world, right? Like suddenly, like we suddenly found that a car is really a computer, just with a shell around it.
Right.
And so I think your thoughts and, in general, I hope people will, innovate, dissect it. And innovation means where are the inefficiencies, where are the issues, and then try to like solve them and hopefully, enrich the entire scape.
Yeah.
That's-
I think the other, area of innovation that everyone's open to is, on the, really on how the sausage is made, in the B2B companies that are creating efficient ways for companies to move content around or to store content. Right now there's a lot of innovation happening in how to do remote production in television and film because of COVID. And again, that will be accelerated, I think. So again, if you find a way, I was advising a company recently that's creating new workflow, ways to create workflows between writers in the writer's room, and how they, when you make changes, how it can all be done in a really organized, integrated digital solution, versus some guy makes changes and then he has to email it back to another guy. You'd be amazed how some of the stuff is still pretty manual. So there's a lot of innovation there too. And I think most people are very open to that innovation, because anything that can create efficiencies and save money is people are all ears.
We had another question from Christina in the chat. If you want to go and mute your mic.
Yeah, I'll go pretty fast. Hi, thank you for coming to talk to us today. It's been really delightful to hear your opinions on the industry. I was living in LA before I came here to Georgetown, so a lot of things that you said really resonated. And I have a question. You kind of brushed on it a little bit. We went from this model of having cable TV in which we had channels and you could watch different TV shows. Now it all becomes every broadcaster has its own app, it seems. So we have Disney Plus, Netflix, Amazon, Apple. I don't know how many more there's going to be. But do you foresee a future in which the companies all come together again in a sort of online version of what broadcasting used to be?
That's a great question. I don't, but what I do think could happen is you'll see some of these won't survive, or they'll get subsumed under someone else. I think you could see that. So 5 years from now, right now there's 7 main streamers, right? Big time streamers. Maybe there'll be 3 or 4. So I do think you'll see some of these folks get out of that business or potentially merge with someone else. That could happen. To your point, I think that's legit. I do think you could say at some point, I'm making this up, but Disney Plus and HBO Max say, let's join forces, right? And be one huge offering. I think you'll see that. I don't think you'll see a kind of master subscription thing where you pay, $60 a month and get 5 of these things. I don't think you'll see that, because everyone cares too much about keeping their own data and all that. But I think you will see some restructuring and honing down. And my prediction is in 5 years, there aren't 7 main streamers. There's 3 or 4.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We have, I promise, the very last question we'll ask. Catherine, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks for squeezing this in. Thank you, Rich. You talked about the dynamic between content creators and content providing platforms and networks. I was wondering if you could expand on that and specifically speak to how that's changing. For instance, you have YouTubers, podcasters, and even actors who have almost a religious following of fans, especially among Gen Z. So whatever platform they move to, their fans will follow, right?
Yeah.
And you even see this, recently with boom in subscription with Netflix through just Tiger King alone. So how are some of the companies that operate the platforms or even distribute the content adapting to this, and how is that going to evolve in your opinion?
Yeah. Well, first off, I think it's been a wonderful evolution in the business. The thought that, a 27-year-old, food blogger can create their own YouTube, channel and have 10 million subscribers and have 10 sponsorship deals is amazing. I mean, I think it's great. There's a young, you guys, I don't know if any of you have children, there's this kid, Ryan, who's this young kid out of Texas, who's become basically the biggest star it started on YouTube with young people. It's called Ryan's World, and he used to unbox things, and that's how it started. I mean, it's massive, massive licensing and merchandising business. So I think how it's going to evolve is you're going to see more and more competition to get this talent exclusively. I think, in Hollywood, it's all about, having content that breaks through the clutter and makes you differentiated. And that means, I don't know if you guys saw this news yesterday, and he's gotten backlash for it, but John Krasinski, you know, he created that thing called Some Good News. I don't know if you read it. He just sold it to Viacom for a big number. There was like a bake-off, and he's getting tremendous backlash for doing it because people said he's sold out. But you know, this thing that this thing didn't even exist 8 weeks ago. So I think you're going to see, and you already see it, you know, more and more competition for how do I take that person and find a way to make them exclusive to me and just pay them a lot of money to do it. And some people resist that. Some of the talent resist it because they don't want to be encumbered. But it's hard to pass up, you know, $5 million, $10 million. Joe Rogan's a great example. He just got $100 million guaranteed from Spotify to be exclusive to them. So I think you're going to see more and more of that. So I think it only helps, you know, individual creators. You're going to see them just become more and more accessible and more opportunities for them. Also, advertisers, they love connecting directly with influencers. So it's built a huge cottage industry.
Rich, we wanted to thank you so much for your time and for joining us today. It was a true treat having you, being able to speak to all of the current MBA students and Flex students, but we really appreciated your time today.
Yeah, no, it was a real pleasure. Thank you for organizing it. Thanks for everyone for attending, and good luck with everything. I know you guys it's a challenging time for all of you, but keep your heads up. And you know, my last word to you in terms of, you know, job search at the time is just be, you know, respectfully aggressive, you know, and network like crazy. Find out people in any way, any networking world you can, be it your undergrad, your B school, family, friends, any professors, anything. That's the name of the game especially when times are challenging.
Excellent.
Thank you, Rich.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Rich.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
Thank you very
so
much.
much.
Thanks, Eric.
Take care.